axe and smash, working each other over. Axe in the
mid-1980s, tag team wrestling was ruled by the unstoppable Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal. They weren't just wrestlers, they were larger-than-life icons, known for their fierce intensity, unforgettable face paint, and hard-hitting style that electrified crowds everywhere. WWE, then WWF, knew they needed a team that could stand toe-to-toe with this powerhouse duo, but with its own unique edge. That's where Demolition came in. What started as WWE's answer to the Road Warriors quickly evolved into something far more than a mere imitation. It became a legendary team forged by two very different wrestlers, Bill Eddie and Barry Darrow, whose combined talents and chemistry created one of wrestling's most memorable and complex tag teams ever. Two paths converge, the backgrounds of Bill Eddie and Barry Darrow. Before the masks, the face paint, and the leather-studded gear, Bill Eddie and Barry Darrow were two very different men carving their own paths in the wrestling world. Their journeys to becoming Demolition's Smash and Axe were as distinct as their wrestling styles, and it was that difference that would eventually create something truly special. Bill Eddie was the seasoned veteran. By the time he arrived in the WWF, he'd already spent years mastering the art of being a heel, a wrestling villain who knew exactly how to get under the skin of the crowd. Eddie had made a name for himself in regional wrestling promotions like Georgia Championship Wrestling and the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, often donning a mask that added an extra layer of menace to his character. The mask wasn't just a costume, it was a psychological tool that helped him maintain an aura of mystery and danger. More importantly, Eddie wasn't just a one-dimensional bad guy. His time as part of the Mongols tag team was a testament to his ability to function in a partnership, a vital skill for tag team wrestling. The Mongols weren't just another duo on the card, they were main event material. They captured championships, headlined shows, and drew solid crowds, proving that Eddie wasn't just a solo act but a force in tag wrestling. On the other side of the ring, Barry Darrow's story was different but equally compelling. Unlike Eddie, Darrow came from a legitimate amateur wrestling background, something that lent him a technical edge rare in sports entertainment at the time. He had wrestled at the University of Minnesota, honing skills in a discipline that valued precision, conditioning, and technique above all else. This gave him an athleticism and toughness that wrestling fans could appreciate, even if it wasn't always flashy. But wrestling in WWE was more than just skill, it was a performance, an act that required charisma, character, and an ability to emotionally connect with an audience. This was where Darrow initially struggled. While his matches showcased his grit and capability, he hadn't yet found that intangible spark, the personality, the swagger, or the presence, that would make him memorable beyond the moves he could pull off. The original lineup and a key change. When WWE first rolled out Demolition, the team looked very different from the powerhouse duo fans would come to know and love. The original lineup paired Bill Eddie with Randy Colley, a wrestler many fans recognized as one of the Moondogs, a wild, scrappy brawler known more for his chaotic style than polished technique. While the Moondog character had its own niche, this initial version of Demolition just didn't land the way WWE hoped. Fans weren't buying it. Instead of the intimidating, destructive team WWE envisioned, the audience saw through the new gimmick. Colley's past as a Moondog made it difficult for the crowd to fully invest in this new persona or buy into the chemistry of the team. The reaction was lukewarm at best, signaling that something was missing. WWE quickly realized the problem. After just a handful of matches, they made a bold and decisive move. Randy Colley was out, and Barry Darrow was in. This swap wasn't just a simple personnel change, it turned out to be the missing piece that would help Demolition truly take shape. From the moment Eddie and Darrow teamed up, the spark was undeniable. Rebranded as Smash and Axe, they clicked both in and out of the ring. Eddie, with his years of experience playing heel characters, understood the art of psychological warfare. He knew how to get under the skin of fans, how to provoke a reaction, and how to hold an audience's attention with a mix of menace and showmanship. Darrow, on the other hand, brought a real, grounded wrestling skill set. His athleticism and technical ability added credibility to the team's overall toughness. This wasn't just a team built on showy gimmicks, it was a genuine blending of old-school villainy and authentic wrestling chops. Together, Smash and Axe became much more than a tag team thrown together at the last minute. They became a believable, intimidating force in the ring, one that fans could respect even as they were meant to hate them. WWE's challenge, creating a new kind of tag team. At the time WWE launched Demolition, the tag team scene was dominated by a pair that was virtually untouchable, the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal. They were larger than life, with electrifying looks, a brutal brawling style, and chemistry so tight it made them must-see TV everywhere they went. For WWE, the challenge was clear but daunting. They wanted a team that could stand toe-to-toe with the Road Warriors, something just as explosive and marketable. But there was a major obstacle. The Road Warriors were signed to Jim Crockett Promotions, a company fiercely protective of their stars. WWE couldn't just sign or buy them away, no matter how much they wanted to. This left WWE with a solid but somewhat unremarkable tag division. They had talent, sure, but nothing that matched the sheer presence or charisma of the Road Warriors. So, the company had to get creative. The solution was to build their own powerhouse team, one designed to bring that same sense of raw energy, intimidation, and spectacle, but with WWE's own unique flair. Demolition wasn't meant to be a copy, but rather a fresh, original answer to the dominant tag teams of the time. This was a delicate balancing act. The team needed to be familiar enough to catch fans' eyes but distinct enough to avoid accusations of imitation. Every detail, how they wrestled, how they looked, and how they connected with the crowd, was carefully crafted to set them apart while still filling that void in WWE's tag division. Crafting the look, more than just face paint. One of the most unforgettable parts of Demolition was their visual identity. WWE knew that their look would be crucial to their success, not just the wrestling moves, but the image they projected the moment they stepped into the arena. Axe's face paint was a key part of that image. It was intricate, haunting, and unsettling. Designed to look like a skull or death mask. This wasn't a random design choice, it was a psychological weapon meant to intimidate opponents and throw fans off balance. The mask gave Axe an air of mystery and menace that made people sit up and take notice. Smash's face paint was simpler but just as effective. Bold, jagged black and white stripes gave him a fierce, no-nonsense look. The simplicity worked in his favor. It made Smash instantly recognizable and reinforced his identity as the team's muscle. He didn't need flashy patterns, his power spoke for itself. But the face paint was only the start. Their leather outfits were covered in spikes and studs, adding a gritty, dangerous edge to their appearance. These weren't just for show, the metal decorations even made noise as they moved, creating an intimidating atmosphere before the bell ever rang. It helped build their reputation as tough, blue-collar brawlers who didn't play by the rules. And of course, there were their signature weapons, the bullpen hammers. These weren't mere props, they were symbols of Demolition's brute strength and their willingness to use any means necessary to win. The sight of those hammers striking the mat was enough to send a clear message: Demolition was ready to destroy anything and anyone who stood in their way. Together, these visual elements created a powerful package. Before a single move was made inside the ring, the crowd already knew they were about to witness something raw, intense, and unforgettable. Making the debut, instant impact. Demolition's first major introduction to the wrestling world came on one of WWE's biggest platforms at the time, a nationally televised episode of Saturday Night's Main Event. For millions of fans tuning in, it was their very first glimpse of this enigmatic new team, and the atmosphere was electric from the moment they stepped into view. Originally introduced by Johnny Valiant, Demolition's presence was quickly elevated when their management shifted to Mr. Fuji. A figure wrestling fans instantly recognized. Fuji was a notorious manager with a reputation for sneaky tactics and underhanded villainy. His involvement wasn't just a change in who was holding the mic, it was a seal of legitimacy for Demolition as a top-tier heel team. Fuji's sly persona perfectly complemented Demolition's raw power and intimidation, making the trio a unit fans loved to hate. But it wasn't just the management that turned heads. Their entrance was something straight out of a rock concert, carefully engineered to command attention. The heavy industrial beats of their theme music hit the arena like a hammer, punctuated by ominous drum beats that seemed to echo through the crowd. It wasn't just an entrance, it was a theatrical event, thick with tension and promise. Every step they took toward the ring was filled with menace, and the fans could feel it. From the opening bell, Demolition was unlike anything the WWE audience had seen before. Their visuals alone. Spiked leather gear, striking black and white face paint, and those signature bullpen hammers, made an impression. But it was their in-ring style that truly set them apart. They weren't just big, they were aggressive, hard-hitting, and relentless. Every move felt impactful, every strike carried weight. The combination of their look, their sound, and their presence captured fans' imaginations and hearts. Unexpected fan reactions, heel or hero. Here's where the story gets interesting. WWE's plan for Demolition was straightforward: they were heels, the bad guys, the villains the fans loved to hate. Their role was to be the monstrous bullies who steamrolled smaller teams with sheer size, brutal tactics, and the ever-present threat of their trusty bullpen hammers. The crowd was supposed to cheer when they lost and boo them loudly at every turn, but wrestling crowds, as any promoter will tell you, don't always play by the script. Before long, something surprising happened. Instead of just being reviled, Demolition began earning respect, and even genuine cheers. Fans admired their toughness, their intensity, and the brutal honesty of their wrestling style. There was an undeniable thrill in watching them tear through opponents with relentless aggression. A big part of this unexpected fan reaction came down to the duo's charisma and authenticity. Bill Eddie's seasoned heel work had always been about more than just throwing punches. He knew how to engage the audience, to provoke emotion, and to tell a story with his presence. Barry Darrow's background as a legitimate, skilled wrestler gave Demolition's offense a real edge. Their matches felt legitimate, with a balance of psychological strategy and physical power. Because of this dynamic, fans found themselves in a strange place. They disliked Demolition's underhanded tactics and rule-breaking, but they couldn't deny their skill and presence. The team became complex characters, more than just the bad guys WWE had initially intended. This shift forced WWE to rethink how they booked Demolition. No longer could they be one-dimensional villains. The team evolved, taking on a more nuanced role that could swing between antagonist and fan favorite depending on the storylines. This complexity made Demolition even more compelling and kept audiences invested in their journey. The price of success: controversy and conflict. But with great success comes great challenges, and Demolition's rise was no exception. Behind the scenes, the story of Demolition was far from smooth sailing. One of the biggest hurdles came from backstage politics and legal battles. As Demolition became one of WWE's top tag teams, questions arose over the rights to their name, likeness, and character designs. These disputes weren't just dry legal matters, they affected how the team was presented on television and strained their relationship with the company. Personal conflicts also played a role. The partnership between Eddie and Darrow, while powerful inside the ring, sometimes fractured outside it. Like many teams built under intense pressure and long touring schedules, differences in personality and ambitions led to tension. Friendships were tested, and those struggles mirrored the drama fans saw in the ring, only more complicated. Perhaps most disheartening was WWE's treatment of Demolition later in their careers. Despite their immense popularity and contributions to the company's tag team legacy, WWE often downplayed or overlooked their role in the sport's history. Attempts were made to minimize their presence in official records or highlight other teams, leading to frustration and a sense of betrayal for the wrestlers. Yet despite these battles, legal, personal, and professional, Demolition's impact on wrestling remains undeniable. They helped redefine what a tag team could be, bringing a blend of theatricality, power, and authenticity that influenced countless teams after them. The original plan, booked as ruthless villains. When WWE first unveiled Demolition, the creative team and management had one clear vision: these two men would be the embodiment of fearsome, ruthless villains who ruled the tag team division through sheer aggression and relentless underhanded tactics. The plan was simple and direct. Demolition would be the ultimate heels, the bad guys fans loved to hate. Their job was to intimidate, dominate, and use every dirty trick imaginable to keep fan favorites down and out. WWE wanted the crowd to despise them so much that arenas would explode with boos every time Demolition made their entrance. This wasn't just about winning matches, it was about sending a message. Demolition was to be bullies, a destructive force stomping on the hopes and dreams of the heroes in the tag team ranks. Their use of props, especially their signature bullpen hammers, wasn't just for show. These weapons were the physical embodiment of their cheating, their willingness to bend or break the rules whenever it suited them. Every night, no matter where they performed, the goal was consistent: have the fans boo them so loudly it felt like thunder, relish their defeats, and yearn for the moment justice finally caught up to them. This was a classic wrestling formula. The bigger and meaner the villain, the louder the crowd would rally behind the good guys. WWE envisioned Demolition as the perfect foil to their top faces, a terrifying presence that would raise the stakes in every match. The team was supposed to provoke anger and disdain, and initially, that's exactly what the company aimed for. The unexpected twist: fans cheered instead of booed. But wrestling, like life, rarely follows the script perfectly. What WWE didn't anticipate was how differently fans would react to Demolition once they hit the ring. Instead of the expected chorus of boos and jeers, an unexpected reaction began to take shape. Fans started cheering Demolition, sometimes loudly and enthusiastically. This was especially true during moments when Demolition showcased their trademark power moves, whether it was a thunderous clothesline, a crushing slam, or their devastating finisher, the Demolition decapitation. Fans weren't just booing out of fear or frustration, they were genuinely excited. In many arenas, the crowd response was mixed: boos from some sections, cheers from others. Entire areas would erupt with applause and whistles as Demolition took control and dominated their opponents with brutal force. This unexpected crowd dynamic puzzled WWE officials. How could a team booked so aggressively as villains suddenly receive applause? How could a group meant to be the antagonists resonate so deeply with the fans? The answer was rooted deeper than mere storylines or character roles. It had to do with the authentic style Demolition brought into the ring, their sheer intensity, physicality, and no-nonsense toughness. Fans responded not just to their villainy but to their approach to wrestling itself. Demolition's raw power and relentless aggression made their matches feel visceral, real, and exciting. The crowd's energy was less about supporting heels or faces and more about respecting the hard work and commitment these wrestlers displayed night after night. What set Demolition apart? A hard-hitting style that resonated. At that time, tag teams often relied on either high-flying acrobatics or slick technical wrestling to wow audiences. These styles could be dazzling, but they sometimes lacked the feeling of raw impact, of punishment that truly connected with fans on a physical, emotional level. Demolition's style was the exact opposite. They didn't rely on flashy moves or complicated sequences, they brought power, toughness, and a sense of real physical dominance that audiences could see and almost feel. Every time Demolition lifted an opponent and slammed them down, it wasn't just a choreographed performance, it felt brutal and convincing. The heavy thud echoed through the arenas, the crowd flinched with each impact, and that rawness created a gritty realism that was missing from many other matches. Their matches weren't just a display of skill, they were a physical spectacle, a primal showcase of strength and intensity. Fans could sense the pain, aggression, and effort in every move Demolition executed. This authenticity forged a strong connection between the team and the audience. Even if the storyline painted them as villains, their sheer passion and ferocity earned respect and, ultimately, admiration. They tapped into something fundamental, an excitement born from witnessing power and determination unleashed in the ring. Growing popularity in the big cities. This unique fan reaction became especially noticeable in wrestling hotspots like New York City and Chicago. These cities were known for their passionate, knowledgeable fans, people who could tell the difference between mere gimmicks and genuine wrestling talent. In arenas packed with wrestling-savvy crowds, Demolition's presence stirred something unusual. In these cities, the team's matches often sparked an intense crowd dynamic. The fans didn't cheer because they liked the characters or storylines. Demolition was still booked as the bad guys, but because they respected the team's dedication and intensity. Their physical storytelling, the way they controlled the pace, and their unyielding aggression made for thrilling matches that captivated even the most critical spectators. This kind of crowd response wasn't just a minor detail, it became a defining part of Demolition's identity. No longer were they just villains in the story, they were performers delivering real, exciting wrestling action. This layered appeal added complexity to their personas and broadened their fanbase, bridging the gap between storyline roles and authentic performance appreciation. Management's dilemma: to resist or embrace. Faced with this unexpected shift, WWE's leadership found themselves in a tricky position. Traditional wrestling logic dictated that Demolition should remain heels and that fans would eventually fall back into the expected pattern of booing and rejection. After all, that's how the system worked. You build up the bad guys until they are despised enough to make their defeat satisfying, but the reality was different. The organic fan enthusiasm for Demolition's style kept growing louder and more widespread. Cheers weren't isolated incidents, they became regular and increasingly impossible to ignore, especially during television tapings where microphones captured every sound. This created a real dilemma. On one hand, some executives wanted to stick to the original plan, fearing that turning Demolition into fan favorites too soon could confuse audiences or damage long-term story arcs. Wrestling storylines often required slow burns and well-planned character developments, so abrupt changes carried risk. On the other hand, others saw a clear opportunity. Why fight the crowd? The fans were responding authentically to what Demolition offered, and tapping into that momentum could elevate the team to even greater heights. Embracing this growing fan base could lead to more engaging storylines, higher merchandise sales, and stronger live event reactions. The turning point: television and nationwide recognition. The real breakthrough for Demolition came when the unexpected fan reaction moved beyond live arenas and started to show up on television. WWE's nationally televised programs, especially Saturday night's main event, were reaching millions of viewers every week, shaping how wrestling fans across the country saw the product. It was on these broadcasts that Demolition's growing popularity could no longer be ignored. What made this moment so striking was that the cheers for Demolition weren't just a few isolated chants here and there. The microphones caught loud, genuine applause and cheers every time they appeared. Fans were responding not just to their storylines, but to their presence. Their hard-hitting style, their intensity, and their undeniable chemistry inside the ring. For WWE executives, this was both a surprise and a dilemma. The company had been firmly booking Demolition as ruthless heels, the kind of villains fans were supposed to hate and boo. But the widespread positive crowd reaction on television made it clear that the old formula wasn't working. Wrestling is, at its heart, a live entertainment business that depends heavily on crowd engagement. If fans were cheering Demolition despite the storyline, WWE couldn't afford to ignore it. Television was the key factor here. Unlike house shows or smaller events where reactions can be localized, TV broadcasts influenced fans nationwide. The enthusiasm for Demolition was no longer a regional phenomenon, it was happening everywhere. Faced with this, WWE started to rethink how they presented Demolition. Rather than fighting the crowd's reaction, they realized the team's strength lay in embracing their complexity. Instead of painting them as one-dimensional villains, WWE began allowing Demolition to evolve into characters who could be both tough and respected, blurring the lines between heel and face. This shift would prove critical in cementing their place in wrestling history. The defining moment: Survivor Series and Mr. Fuji's betrayal. In wrestling, few moments stick with fans like a shocking betrayal, a twist that suddenly changes everything. For Demolition, that moment came at the 1988 Survivor Series, and it became the turning point that transformed them from feared heels into genuine fan favorites. Up until that point, Demolition had been managed by Mr. Fuji, a character infamous for his sneaky tactics, sly manipulations, and outright villainy. Fuji was the perfect mouthpiece for a team that was supposed to be ruthless and untrustworthy. His presence only amplified Demolition's menacing aura, signaling to the crowd that these guys were dangerous and not to be trusted. But at Survivor Series, something unexpected happened. Fuji shockingly turned his back on Demolition, betraying the very team he had guided. Instead, he aligned himself with the Powers of Pain, another heel tag team who were Demolition's rivals. This act of treachery wasn't just a storyline plot, it was a dramatic moment that hit fans emotionally. Suddenly, the team that had been villains through and through were painted as victims of a cruel betrayal. The audience, who had already begun to respect Demolition's toughness and skill, now had a clear and personal reason to cheer for them. They weren't just intimidating bad guys anymore, they were wronged fighters who deserved sympathy and support. This betrayal accelerated a shift that was already happening organically in arenas across the country. Fans started seeing Demolition in a new light, not just as villains to fear, but as underdogs fighting against unfair treatment and treacherous foes. Wrestling crowds instinctively love stories of redemption, and Demolition's newfound narrative tapped right into that emotional vein. The gradual shift, from villains to anti-heroes. Demolition's transformation was never a sudden overnight change, it was more of a slow burn, carefully woven through months of subtle shifts in their booking and presentation. Instead of sneaking around the ring and attacking their opponents from behind, they began accepting challenges head-on. Their promos shifted focus too, they talked less about intimidation and more about pride, resilience, and toughness. The team was no longer about crushing opponents through dirty tricks, they were about proving who was the toughest in the division through grit and determination. This new incarnation of Demolition teetered between villain and hero, they became anti-heroes. Characters complex enough to have flaws and rough edges but who were earning respect because of their heart and fighting spirit. Their iconic bullpen hammers, once blatant symbols of cheating, were repurposed. Instead of using the weapons to blatantly break rules, Demolition used them as psychological tools, intimidating opponents before the match even began. It was a shift from physical rule-breaking to mental warfare. Fans noticed and appreciated this evolution. They admired that Demolition's rising popularity wasn't the product of fancy promos or melodramatic angles. Instead, it was a reward for consistent hard work, relentless in-ring performances, and an unmistakable passion for wrestling. The power of organic popularity. There's something truly special when a wrestling team becomes popular not because a company tells fans to cheer for them, but because the fans themselves choose to. That's exactly what happened with Demolition. Their rise wasn't crafted by slick scripts or flashy storylines, it came from a deeper, more authentic connection between the wrestlers and the audience. It was built on something raw and real, shared excitement, mutual respect, and the sheer thrill of watching two men give it their all in the ring night after night. In professional wrestling, this kind of grassroots support is rare and incredibly valuable. When fans organically embrace a team, it creates a bond that feels genuine and lasting. It's not just about the storyline pushing a character forward. It's about something more emotional and primal. Fans start buying the merchandise, filling the arenas, and engaging with the wrestlers beyond the scripted show. They cheer for them because they want to, not because someone told them to. For Demolition, this organic popularity meant everything. They began as villains, characters that WWE intended for fans to hate. But their physicality, their relentless aggression, and their undeniable presence in the ring won over many fans who saw them as more than just bad guys. The team's journey from despised heels to beloved anti-heroes is a powerful testament to the importance of authenticity in wrestling. Wrestling fans don't just want heroes in the classic sense. They want performers who work hard, fight hard, and make every match feel important and real. They want a story they can feel in their bones. The WrestleMania moment, seizing the spotlight. By the time WrestleMania 4 came around in March 1988, Demolition's momentum was impossible to ignore. WrestleMania was fast becoming the biggest event in professional wrestling, a grand stage where careers were defined, and legacies were made or broken in front of millions of viewers worldwide. Demolition was given a chance at the WWE Tag Team Championship, facing off against Strike Force, Tito Santana and Rick Martel, the reigning champions. Strike Force were the quintessential fan favorites, technical wrestlers with smooth teamwork, known for their speed, precision, and clean style. Their approach was almost the opposite of Demolition's, where Demolition relied on brute strength and relentless power. Strike Force used agility and technique. This contrast made for a natural and compelling dynamic. Fans were eager to see if Demolition's raw power could overcome the finesse and skill of Strike Force. It was a classic clash of styles, muscle versus technique, aggression versus speed. The match itself was a showcase for what had made Demolition so captivating. Early on, Strike Force's quick tags and high-energy offense kept Demolition off balance, preventing them from fully unleashing their power. But as the match progressed, the tide began to turn. Demolition's sheer strength started to dominate the ring. Every slam, every strike landed with brutal force, and their signature finisher, the Demolition decapitation, was as devastating as fans had come to expect. When Demolition finally captured the WWE Tag Team Championship that night, it was about more than just a title change. It was a validation of everything they had worked for. It was WWE's way of acknowledging that Demolition had earned their place at the top. Not just because of a storyline push but through real popularity and undeniable wrestling ability. Looking back, a story of growth and connection. The story of Demolition is about so much more than championships or face turns. It's a story about the powerful connection between performers and their audience, the unpredictable magic of live entertainment, and how wrestling characters can evolve in ways no one fully anticipates. Demolition's journey from feared villains to beloved anti-heroes wasn't something scripted in stone from the beginning. Instead, it was shaped by the crowd's reactions and the team's willingness to adapt and grow. Wrestling success isn't just about playing a part, it's about earning respect night after night, through passion, skill, and authenticity. What made Demolition stand out was their rawness. They weren't polished heroes with shiny costumes and catchy catchphrases. They were gritty, tough, relentless fighters who wore their intensity on their sleeves and poured everything they had into every match. They brought a visceral energy that fans could see and feel. Their bullpen hammers, spiked leather gear, and intimidating face paint weren't just props, they were symbols of a team that meant business. Because of this authenticity, fans connected with Demolition on a deeper level. They weren't simply characters in a show, they felt like real competitors battling it out night after night. The team's chemistry, their ability to tell stories through physicality, and their relentless work ethic gave fans something they could believe in. That connection turned Demolition into something bigger than the sum of their parts. They became a team whose appeal crossed the usual boundaries of good guy versus bad guy. Instead, they occupied a space that felt real, raw, and relatable. Your one click can help us keep creating awesome stuff.